All right, welcome everyone. We are on lecture 3, and today we'll be talking about the camera. I often refer to the camera like a paintbrush for an artist. I love the show Bob Ross. If you ever watch Bob Ross, you'll see he's got all these different paintbrushes that can do all these different things, depending upon what look it is he's going for or what he needs to do or something, in the painting world, whatever it is. And the camera's a little bit like that. It's kind of a multifaceted tool, and it just sort of depends on, what the overall look is or what message that they're trying to convey. So cameras just become fascinating. You could really delve in deep to these as far as the mechanics and how they work, but we're going to primarily focus on how the camera helps tell a story. Okay, so if you see this picture here, we got two guys standing near columns. And if you look over here on the left, you can kind of see that this camera is stationary. And what they've done, A, B, C represent the different shots. And so what they've done is they've changed the lens. We'll go over what the different settings are. But rather than move the camera closer to the subjects, they changed the lens that can just get in closer, sort of like how you zoom in on your phone or something like that. Um, but then over here to the right, we have the same focal length, but the camera's moved just in closer instead of zooming in or something like that. They've simply just moved the camera in closer, and you can see a difference. All right, so if A is our base, we can kind of see, okay, this is very similar, but as we move in closer, the camera creates a completely different story, right? So over here on the left, the fact that these two men are sort of uh, overlapping each other kind of communicates a closeness, a oneness to them. So there's a sense of kind of harmony. Even here, I mean, it kind of feels almost like one person. There's a oneness to them. So you can kind of come up with your own ideas of, what it is that this story, what's happening in this moment. Just by looking at it, you can kind of come up with something. Versus over here, there's a clear distance. Okay, they feel completely separated. They might not even know each other, or they might be in conflict. Okay, so the point is that the camera, just by itself, can help you tell a story. So right now we're talking about focal length. What is focal length? Well, in a nutshell, it's how wide is the shot. I mean, really, it's kind of if you were to the scope of the shot, basically, if you were to kind of measure out the scope, side to side, specifically of what we're seeing, this field of view. So we have what's called a normal focal length, and it's called normal because it's adhering to what your vision sees. We have our own focal length. It's somewhere between 40, 50, somewhere in there. It just looks normal. It's what we're used to seeing. So nothing is kind of out of the ordinary, very normal. We have telephoto lens, or kind of where space gets compressed. We get closer to that object, so we can see things that space is sort of compressed, right? So usually you'll see that 85 millimeter and over. If you look on lenses, just to kind of go back, you'll see a measurement on them. And that could range. So it could be, go from a wide to a telephoto, which is, like I mentioned, exactly like the zoom on a phone or maybe a camera that you have. We're just measuring that focal length depending upon what it is we're looking for. And then we also have a wide focal length. So this is something 35 millimeter and below. Don't worry if this isn't making sense. Got some examples coming up, just giving you the terminology for now. So this gives us kind of a greater scope of what's going on in the shot or the scene. So we have wide, we have normal, and we have telephoto. Sometimes you'll even see on cameras where that zoom is, you'll see a W or a T, and that's just wide or telephoto. And not all lenses zoom. Some are fixed. We call those primes. They have one measurement, and whatever that might be. So we can kind of see here, it's cycling through, when different lenses are being put on, you can kind of see what's going on. So here, when it's 16 millimeters, everything's kind of wide. As we zoom in at different focal lengths, we can kind of see that space getting compressed, and it creates that shallow depth of field behind him where things start to get out of focus. We'll talk about that a little bit more too, but you can kind of see wide, normal, telephoto all in one. Again, we have these prime lenses that are fixed to one focal length, and we have zoom that can vary between your different focal lengths. We can see this pretty famous shot from Jaws. And this is kind of if you look at that background versus the zoom in. So the camera is both zooming in as the camera is getting closer. So it's creating this sort of distorted sense of space. But that a zoom kind of helps to create this movement, this camera movement. The camera can move without having to zoom in. It can, physically be moved in closer to an object, and you can get closer that way. But you can also zoom. A zoom looks like a zoom, and a camera movement looks like a camera movement. Here again, we could kind of see from a fixed position what different focal lengths will get you. So we're standing out in a field. We're up here at 18 millimeters. We have a nice wide perspective on this little farm, and we increasingly get closer, 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 closer. So again, determining what focal length you need is dependent on what you're going for, what the shot is saying. Relation to the space, the character, the story, any of that will determine how a director of photography will select which lens they need to use. Okay, so we have shot size. Some are chosen for convenience, some are genre specific, some speak to the state of mind of someone, some tell the audience what the story is in a shot. So you're always thinking, how will people react to this shot? So kind of the economics of what's going on, changing out a lens on a big film set, it takes a really long time. So before they kind of go in, all that pre-planning and pre-production, which we've talked about before, helps so they know what to go get and when to get it. But also they're thinking, how will people react to the shot? So perhaps the shoot needs to kind of move quicker, so they might not have as much time to change out a lens, but there's something specific that they want. So how are we getting this information? How do we relate to it emotionally? And how do they keep the film moving? Because if you've worked on a film set, it's a lumbering beast. It is a slow going process sometimes. That's why some films just use one focal length throughout. Movies like Chinatown, Godfather, they'll stick to one focal length throughout the whole shoot, and they just have to get creative where that camera goes, where they place actors, where they place objects, things like that to help tell the story. So we have what we'll call wide shots. We will call them because most people call them. You'll also hear them referred to as long shots. So one and the same. Again, you get a nice wide view of what's going on. Usually a wide shot establishes a scene or geography. It kind of lets you know where you are. We as humans, we like establishing shots. We like long shots. We like wide shots because they provide the most information about our surroundings. We're kind of like that when we go into buildings. We kind of don't generally just go straight to a specific, we look at the big picture first. That's just kind of how we're hardwired. So you'll see a lot of films, TV shows, things like that. They're going to start with an establishing shot. Not always, but at some point, people need to know the information of what's going on. Wide shots can obviously capture more action. That's why you'll see a lot of Marvel movies and things like that. Stay kind of a little bit more in the wide. You kind of get a better scope of what's going on at the time. Then we have these things called medium shots that bring you a little, they're exactly what they sound. They're a little bit closer in. They give you a little bit more action. They still give you information, but it's starting to focus on things and it's eliminating any background distraction. So we can kind of see, we're a little bit more in the personal space of the actors. We're gathering more information about what's going on in a scene, but we're not so far back. We're being pulled into a little bit more personal, a little bit more intimate kind of relationship with what's going on in the screen in medium shots. And kind of with medium, we're kind of seeing half of our actors here. There's no hard and fast rule to how these work. It's all about communicating with your team, what's going on in a given scene or something like that. So, they'll just say we just need a medium shot of these three characters, and most cinematographers, director of photography, they'll know what that language is, because we're more interested in what's going on with the characters up in an area like this. We don't really care what's going on around them or anything like that. And then we have the close-up. And this is where we're focusing in on a specific detail. We're looking to create a large impact. And this forces the audience to look at one thing or something specific. So close-up. Right now, we're uncomfortably close to something, and this elicits that feeling, that emotion of what's happening at that moment. We also a lot of times use close-ups just for simple conversations, kind of getting again, more intimate with a character, really focusing in on what they're saying, what's going on. Because really, what's going on back here, we don't want to focus on it. We don't want to know what's going on. We want to know what the character is thinking at a given moment, what they're saying, and the director's saying, look just at this. Don't worry about anything else. Just look at this. So as I said, there's kind of a large gamut to shot size. You can kind of see how it's abbreviated, just to make life easier for different people as they're doing the pre-production process, and they're planning things out with, storyboards, taking pictures, doing something like this. They'll just abbreviate what's going on. Again, over here, you're seeing long shot synonymous with wide shot, but the verbiage is a little, I don't want to say ambiguous, but there's no rule, there's no measurement for what constitutes a medium shot versus a medium close-up. It's like if you're saying, I want it close, not too close, but close, medium close-up. Medium shot, just, hips up kind of a thing. Medium full shot, again, the verbiage is a little self-explanatory, I guess is the best way of putting it. Then we also have angle. The most straightforward one is eye level, where we're just at the level of the eyes. We're kind of framing for that, just to puts us on a little bit more personal level, kind of akin to, I guess you would say, the normal shot, the normal focal length that we talked about before. Eye level kind of puts you at that, this is how we experience our everyday life, is we're kind of normally at eye level. And then we have low angle. This gives a greater size to objects and can make them more imposing. If you get confused between low angle and high angle, which we're about to talk about, just think about, where is the camera? The camera is low, looking up. So Batman looks imposing and big. He kind of mimics that building going on behind him. again, example of low angle, it gives sort of greater depth to an object, whereas a high angle can do kind of the opposite, can make objects or characters appear smaller or less imposing. You'll see this when you watch Citizen Kane. Be looking out for these different angles, shot sizes, things of that, as you're watching that film, and see how are these shots helping to communicate the story. We have this other one called I've heard it by all different names, a canted angle, a tilt angle, a Dutch angle, and you could see it's doing exactly what it says. Look over here at the stairs. You know, it's a thing that they kind of turn the camera a little bit based on the intensity of whatever is going on to show something's not right. There's something askew in the scene. American Horror Story, if you ever watch that series, pretty much every shot is not level. And it kind of can distract from what's going on in the scene at that moment. But watch for this. You see it a lot. It's certainly more done in modern films and photography than it was before. Can put you in the mind psychologically of what a character is going through too. We have this other one. It's a point of view shot. We've kind of mentioned this a little bit before. So we have shot A, where we see the character, and then shot B, we see what they see. So we're in their mind, so to speak. We're seeing what they see. This is point of view. Becomes very important when we're connecting with a character. We talked about this with the Spider-Man example, but here's another visual example from Rear Window. We have over-the-shoulder OTS, as it's called, and this is usually just over the shoulder in some degree of two people talking. The amount of headroom of a character, not largely important, but it just, how is it, framing the scene? We could see that these are slightly different. We're a little bit closer in on this character than we are over here. So, there's reasoning behind it. Again, over the shoulder is sort of the generic term, how close you're in, how much of the shoulder of another character you're seeing is all dependent upon the point of the scene. All right, we also have camera movement. All right, so we're looking at an overhead of the camera on this side over here. So we have a tracking shot, which is the camera staying stationary, but it's moving left and right. All right, so kind of focused in on one area. Again, camera's in one position. We have a pan. We pan left, we pan right. All right, so it's just kind of depending on what you need. This movement will, usually follow someone. They're tracking left and right with them. And this again is the camera staying stationary to one spot, fixed to a tripod, panning left and right. Tracking shot, you're going to be on wheels of some kind. So when I say this camera is stationary, it is, pointing in this direction. So it's going to get a field of view, let's say of here, and then it'll move on wheels or tracks going up and down. So stationary on whatever platform it's on, but moving on wheels, just to clarify what I mean. And sort of the counterpart to that, now we're looking at the side of the camera, is a dolly. So tracking is on tracks going left or right. Dolly is on tracks going forward and backwards. So here's my cursor is representing the camera. It's just moving backwards and forwards. You'll see examples of this. Now the zoom, the camera is on a tripod, staying in one spot, and then that focal length just changes. So we zoom in or we zoom out. The camera on a tripod fixed, not moving from the spot it's in, it can tilt up, it can tilt down, or it can, from a fixed spot, crane up, crane down. Sometimes you'll hear that called boom. So just some basic ones. There's a video example at the end of this that'll give you a little bit more detailed examples to watch. Okay, so we'll talk about this a couple times. The rule of thirds. Right where these lines intersect, is generally speaking where shots are framed. This is where our eye is kind of drawn and what we start to look for. So now that we have films that are coming out in this aspect ratio, you'll learn a little bit more about what aspect ratio is coming up. But we try and frame along these lines. You can see some examples here of, where these lines intersect, trying to place our subject or object close to them, just to give you the eyes are just kind of naturally drawn there. That doesn't have to always be that way, but that's just kind of our go-to spots when composing shots. We have another thing called the golden ratio. You see this in nature everywhere. It's kind of this odd numbering system that kind of repeats upon itself. So some shots can be composed this way as well. We have balanced and unbalanced shots, and it's exactly what it sounds like. We can see over here that this shot's got kind of a nice balance to its composition, that the weight of the shot is not as heavy to one side or the middle as, say, these shots are. We just feel a natural sense of balance. We can kind of see it here. Everything kind of seems just symmetrical in a sort of pleasing sort of way. So it just, again, what are they trying to communicate with each shot? Why balance it like this? All depends on what the intention of the director is on a given shot for a given scene and a given story. We can also use unbalanced to communicate something. This is from the King's Speech. Don't want to give too much away if you haven't seen it, because it's worth a watch, but we can kind of see how this unbalance to the shot really works to help set the tone for what's going on with the king here inside his head. That there's sort of an unbalance with him. So we show that visually to help communicate what's going on internally. We have some that are a little bit in between. We can see that there's some nice balance. It might seem heavier in some areas than others. We can see specifically on this picture here on the left. I think the shot would still work. If this was taken out, it just would be, a little balanced, a little bit more left. These people are a little distracting in the shot, but I didn't take this picture, so I can't say much about it. We also have this center framing, which is exactly what it sounds like. We put our focus in the center of what's going on. Again, it's just, where are you drawing the eye? What is the importance? What are we as the audience supposed to look at? So center frame can sometimes help draw your eye where you're supposed to go at a given moment. We have limited framing, where the action or the actors are sort of framed within the frame in a certain way. I'm gonna not assume, but hope everybody has seen The Graduate, and we know this infamous shot and what it means, and it's suggesting and everything like that. We can also see how limited framing can create a tightness, a feeling of kind of the world collapsing around you. Again, what's going on in the scene? How can the camera help us achieve what the audience needs to know? We have leading lines that are used in film a lot too. Kind of natural, or not even natural, but lines found within the frame that can point where the eye is supposed to go. We just kind of see these and it's like, oh, my eye is supposed to go there. That's what I'm looking at. Again, it helps to get the director and the director of photography to get creative about telling you what to look at, and without always being trying to think of the right way of saying this. You almost want it invisible, like it doesn't seem heavy-handed. You're just you're being drawn there and you're unaware that they're telling you to look here. They're kind of, the director and director of photography are trying to remain a little bit hidden. So again, your eye, when it's watching action, we're looking for movement, we're looking for all these things, but where the eye kind of naturally goes can be manipulated a little bit through things like leading lines. There's a pattern uh, with filming the master scene method. It's just kind of one that works for many reasons when making a film. And generally, it's a master or establishing shot, and then you go to a medium, then you go to a close up, then you go to inserts. Inserts are just kind of random cutaway shots if there's something in the room that's not really necessarily tied to the scene, but important, or gives you ability to edit and post. And the reason that they generally shoot this way and it gets edited this way, well, first let's talk about why it's shot this way. Let's assume you are shooting a movie. You have a large crew and a short amount of time, and you get to your location and you maybe just have 2 or 3 hours there. Well, if I shoot the master, which is I shoot the entirety of a scene in a wide shot, if everything goes crazy, I have that scene shot. It might not be pretty, it might not be good, but it's shot. Okay, and then I can move into my medium shots. I can move in a little bit closer, a little bit more intimate with my characters. Again, if something goes wrong, well, hey, I have my master and I have stuff to cut to in the medium. And your time still hasn't run out. I can move into my close-ups. I can move into my inserts. So that's really reason why they do that. If you shot your close-ups first, you have one character talking and you get your close-ups first, and then, like all things with film, things go wrong. You don't have anything but your close-ups, and they don't really do you any good. But the other reason is that it's kind of emotionally important to us. Is this is just kind of how the brain works. We, like I said, gather information about a room, a location, geography of what's going on, and then we move in closer to the information that the characters are giving us and that the director wants us to see. So we establish our geography, we move in a little closer, we move in a little closer, and then we get inserts, we get additional information about the scene, about the room, about what they're talking about, things like that. So just an example of an insert, we have, two characters talking. They're sitting at a table eating breakfast, and there's a cut-in shot of an insert shot of one of them pouring water. Could be any thematically why they're getting the shot. It also helps with the edit. If I'm shooting the master shot and the first half of take one is good and the second half of take two is good, I can use that insert shot to bridge them together and nobody would know that it was different. So different reasons why we get different shots. There's a few rules with filmmaking. The great thing about filmmaking is rules can be broken. The first one that you'll need to know or kind of look for is this 180-degree rule. So when two characters are talking, there's sort of this invisible line that gets created. You can establish this line wherever you want. Generally, I do nose to nose of two characters if I'm shooting something. So anything on this side, I can put that camera anywhere I want, and I'll be adhering to the 180-degree rule. Look over here. We have a little bit clearer example. So we have the line, and we have the camera one, which is shooting this OTS, this over the shoulder, and camera two, getting the reverse angle. So we can see this gentleman here is on the left side of the frame here, and he's on the left side of the frame here. Okay, it hasn't, the world hasn't flipped itself. But if we move camera two to the wrong side, now he's on the left, now he's on the right. Doesn't make sense. And we might not pick it up right away specifically, but we're going to say, hey, something's wrong. The world is like all of a sudden flipping. Can it be broken? Yes, it can, for sure. This is a good example from The Shining. We can see over here on the left, over here on the right. When can you break it? Typically, you'll see if we've established this geography well enough that we get an idea and we accept what's going on, we can flip it completely and we're going to go come straight across as they did in this shot, and it works, and we'll believe it. We don't sit there and completely always get taken out. But thematically, this also has a purpose in that if you've seen this movie, mirrors are really important, and that's kind of what mirrors do to us, is they kind of, sort of flip things a little bit. Anyway, that is the 180 degree rule. And then we have this other one, which is the 30 degree or 20 millimeter rule. That is to say, the camera needs to move 30 degrees from shot to shot. 30 degrees, and if you like had a compass out or something, where 30 degrees is, or the lens has to change by a minimum of 20 millimeters. Otherwise, you can kind of see this sort of jumps. It's going to create kind of an unnatural jump. We can see by changing the focal length or changing the position of the camera, these shots will cut together seamlessly, whereas it's too similar, so it's gonna be jarring. Can you do it? Sure. Do you want to? It depends, is the long and short answer. If you want that jumpy feeling, you could get away with doing it. If you don't, and you want your audience to remain in sort of that world of the story without being jotted out, and that feeling of, oh yeah, I'm just watching a movie, that's something that filmmakers typically want to avoid. Mise-en-scène, something that we'll be talking a lot about. But just to give you an idea, it's the placement of objects in the frame. This can also refer to the characters. I'm just giving you, I know probably if some of you are in theater, you're saying, no, it's so much more complicated and complex than that. And I would agree. But just for the sake of this course, we're going to just kind of talk about it in terms of where are things in the frame, the staging of things, the placement of things. Is there a balance? Is there an imbalance? Do we need room in the shot for the characters to, move back and forth? And again, Citizen Kane will be a great example of the mise-en-scène, the movement and placement of objects in the frame. Another key thing to talk about is this idea of the depth of field. Depth of field is referring to what is in focus in the shot. So we can see we have this area up to this area in focus. Even closer in towards us, we can see it starts to get out of focus. And then, so this is a very shallow depth of field. We'll refer to these as a shallow depth of field and a deep depth of field. Deep, we got a good idea. We have more focus going on in the background versus this shot. So maybe we want to just focus in on this object. We can use a shallow. Maybe we need to know what's going on in the background. So we have a deep depth of field. This number here is referring to the aperture of the camera, which is how much light is being allowed in, and that can affect depth of field. We're not a production-based class, so we won't get too into the mathematics of everything, but this gives you a good idea. Another example of it, you can see from where the camera is to this point of focus, and that area around it that would be in focus. Typically speaking, from our point of focus, it's 1/3 in front, 2/3 behind that will be in focus towards a given area. So we have our distance from camera to the focus point. And then we also have, we can kind of start to see then what is in focus and what's not. Pay really close attention to this with Citizen Kane, where he is, what's in focus. This was kind of a groundbreaking film in that there was the ability to have this deeper focus for the first time. Cameras and lenses were starting to get a little bit more advanced where they can do this. Orson Welles wanted it to feel theatrical, like you were going to watch a play. So he wanted to kind of mimic that experience. He also wanted to help tell the story of Kane through this large deep depth of field, and that mise-en-scène, where things are placed in the frame. All right, so the four areas that control depth of field is the sensor size. All cameras sort of vary, and now that we're kind of in the digital age, um, that's mostly what cameras are going to have is this different sensor. It allows for a lot of times people are looking for that shallow depth of field that's a little bit harder to create. Um, if you've ever had a handy cam or something like that, or even your smartphones, things like that have a small sensor, and that just creates a deeper depth of field. The other thing that can impact it is the focal length that we talked about at the beginning. So the closer you are to that telephoto side, like 80, 85 millimeters and up, you're going to start to see more shallow depth of field. The other thing is that focus distance that we just talked about that can control, the where the object is placed closer or further from the camera. That can affect it. And then the aperture opening, which is kind of like just a hole in the lens that you can open or close and allow more or less light in. And the more open that hole is, the more light that's coming in, the shallower that shot becomes. So the four things that can control that depth of field are right here. We can see again, this is from Citizen Kane, kind of an example of what I'm talking about. And other examples I kind of show this is we see how he as a child is still in focus back in here, and then we have the placement of characters in such a way that's communicating something to us as the audience simply by where they are and how much is in focus in the shot. So you can analyze it up and down, left and right, and gain meaning out of it by the fact that we're not just cutting back and forth. He could have done that. He could have just cut from his mother to his father to him, all these things. It wouldn't have created the same thing as playing it out all in one shot. All right, so I mentioned the ratios earlier of different films, and they've kind of changed. So you're going to watch a little video on aspect ratio. Long and short of it is, how much of this image are we seeing? Now, this could be shot in a ratio this way, or it can be chopped in post to fit whatever. So film's ratio really had a lot to do with how the projectors were playing films and what was accepted by all the studios at a time so that they can all play their films different places, things like that. And then it changed over time to compete with things like television to make the experience more engaging. So it just kind of grew over time, and it's changed. There's different aspect ratios now that we can project digitally as well. And they can fake it by adding, the black boxes to the top or bottom to fit whatever needs that they have. So 16:9 is standard. If you have a widescreen at home, it's 16:9, and that's just kind of the ratio that's a little bit more standard now. But this was the kind of Academy ratio. You'll see this as 1:33. In 1937, it was 1:37. But they're kind of synonymous because the difference is so negligible. So that is aspect ratio. We can kind of see the difference here and what the different aspect ratios give you as far as adhering to the rule of thirds as well.